So we've covered range battles, like engaging in the first place. We've covered not getting swept by stupid stuff right off the bat.
Yep.
Now we're moving on to actually passing the guard and getting a dominant position. Is that?
Yes, we've survived the fiery plane crash. Our parachute has gotten us safely to the ground, and now we're going to pass the guard.
Okay.
So we're going to go through a couple of conceptual definitions for types of guard passes and how we can use combinations of these to pass the guard as we move on later. But the first thing we're going to do is define the first approach to passing the guard, which is hip and lever control. And again, hip and lever is a running theme throughout these volumes. It's one of the most important concepts, controlling the hip and the lever to the hip, whether it's for sweeping, for passing, for escaping positions. So in this case, again, we're passing the guard. So my goal is to establish control. Let's say I managed to scoop your legs up. I'm going to establish direct pressure on your hip, and this can come from gripping your belt or just placing my hand on your hip, and then direct pressure on the end of the lever to the hip. And once I've done that, there's a series of passes that you can attempt with this particular method of control. So why is hip and lever control important? If I only place my hand on Stephan's hip and don't control the lever to his hip, I want you to go ahead and hip escape for me, Stephan. Pretty easy to do. I don't really have the kind of power in my body until I do a cycle of steroids or 2 or 50 to pin a human being just by virtue of placing my hand on the floor. But as we discussed earlier in these volumes, a lever is a force multiplier. So even though I don't have the control with just one hand, if I can pin the lever to your hip to the ground, now go ahead and hip escape for me.
Much harder.
Very difficult. And certainly if you wanted to hip escape that way, it would be impossible.
No.
So I've done 2 things. One, I've made it harder for you to hip escape, and 2, I've decided for you that the only direction you can hip escape is that way. So one of the things that we're trying to create, or one of the circumstances we're trying to create when we pass the guard, is a predictable reaction from our opponent. The more options that you have, the harder it is for me to react to those individual options. By accessing a lever to your hip, I make you go to one direction only to hip escape. So if I choose to react to that, it's going to be quicker for me.
So I only have one thing to do, so you can already have the response to that pre-programmed.
Exactly.
So you look like a super reaction god.
Exactly. This is a concept elucidated very well by Ryan Hall, is the idea that if I can predict your reaction, I can seem superhuman in my responses. It's not that I'm that fast, it's just that you only had one option. I knew what you were going to do. If I can predict what you're going to do, I can measure my response accordingly and seem infinitely faster than I would if my brain computer had to process 5 or 6 different things at the same time. Right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to go over 5, count them, 5 examples of this concept, the hip and lever concept, applied to a guard pass. And all of these are guard passes that you see at the highest level, black belt level of the World Championships, so you know they work. First one is going to be the Toreando, or a variation of the Toreando anyway, where I've established, again, I'm going to approach the guard in good base. Let's say I get my first range battle, I win this grip, I separate Stephan's legs, and I get into the hip and the lever to the hip. To pin the lever to the hip, what I'm going to look to do is, rather than push down on his knee, because don't let me do this, right? I said, yeah. Weirdly enough, my triceps is not stronger than Stephan's leg, but my entire body weight is. So that's how I'm going to affect this. I'm going to keep my right arm on his hip. I can use my elbow here to fence his leg out, because if I get too shallow, he can turn his knee in, exactly push me away. Or if he's a leg lasso player, oh man, I'm going to spend all day there. So I'm going to fence this out with my elbow, put my body weight on the knee, and now I'm going to redirect his knee and drop my shoulder on his midsection, stepping into hip control and passing the guard. So just one more time from this angle. I get my good control, I step in, maintaining good knee-elbow connection, fence his leg out, walk my body weight over his knee, and then I'm going to shift from pushing down to pushing, or at least pushing down towards the floor. Now I'm going to push down towards his feet, dropping my weight on his sternum. Now I'm doing this gently because I'm such a nice fellow, but in a situation where you were actually performing this, you'd be driving your shoulder into your partner's sternum, keeping your knees off the mat before you settle down into the final position.
So you spike him, take some of the wind out of him.
You want to see what he had for lunch at that point. Yeah, the next example we're going to use is called a knee overpass. So again, I can use a similar entry here where I've captured Stephan's feet, I've moved into this position, I start to bring this knee down, I'm going to slip my arm underneath and place my knee over his hip. So my shin is pinning the lever to his hip, my hip here, and my arm accessing this lever is controlling the hip on this side. I'm now going to extend my body upwards, allowing his leg to slip by. This is one of those passes that against less flexible people will work really quickly. Against more flexible people, you're going to have to really pin their leg to their body. So I don't know quite how flexible Stephan is, but you'll notice I'm shucking his leg by. A common error here, and this goes back to alignment. Right now, I have base, I have posture, I have good structure. A lot of people make this error. They bend their head as they try to do this pass. Now push me away, Stephan. Yeah, I just need myself in the face. How good are you going to feel if that happens? But if I keep good solid posture here, I should be able to just raise through to pass the guard. Okay, so from a different angle now, I've caught the soles of the feet. I start to move in. I start to pin the lever to Stephan's hip, and I place my hand on the mat for base. I'm driving my weight forward, making sure my right foot is in base as well. Again, common errors here. We mentioned earlier posture. Push me back now, Stephan. Oh, crap, what happened? I didn't have base. I didn't have effective base. I plant my right foot, now you can feel the difference. You're not moving me. I keep good posture. I shrug my shoulders, maintaining pressure. I find my underhook. My knees are off the mat, so I'm keeping all of my weight on you, but not overcommitting it. I have control of my center of gravity and my momentum, and I've finished my guard pass. A great example of this pass, made famous by world champion, multiple-time world champion, absolute division world champion, and all-around great guy, Bernardo Faria, is the over-unders pass. So if I'm a low passer and I manage to stuff Stephan's legs down and step in between, I'm going to be able to access this pass. I'm going to control his hip with an underhook and control the lever to his hip with an overhook. I'm going to bring my weight off the mat. Generally speaking, he's going to be trying to keep his legs in between my legs, so I need to find a way to break that alignment. A common error here is people try to drive forward. What I actually want to do is extend my leg accessing this lever. And you're going to have to get good at balancing here. Now, I'm going to move to the center, crushing that lever down, and I'm going to circle my foot out, placing my knee behind his leg, still controlling the levers to his hip, and making sure that I've got good pressure with my shoulder. Again, I'm being nice by not putting my shoulder in his sternum, in his solar plexus, but generally speaking, we'd be doing it like that. So,
Excellent.
yeah, just so you know where to put your shoulder, this is not where it should be. It should be underneath Stephan's diaphragm. So once I've done that, I can move into my final passing position, secure the hips, and then fight to move up the body. Okay, so here's an example of how we could do this standing. I could be controlling, again, the soles of the feet and stepping into the pass right from there. I'm going to pinch my knees together. My opponent's always going to be trying to keep this knee outside to maintain a frame. So if I try to just kind of take my leg out, I might get stuck. So I do this leg extension, accessing the lever, making sure my opponent's knee is underneath my belly button. I pinch my knees together again. I walk to the center, keeping all of my weight on my opponent. I circle my leg out, still keeping my weight on my opponent. I take my arm out, rotate his hips so I can access this underhook, and finish my guard pass.
So by hooking your leg, you're taking my leg and turning it into a better lever.
Exactly. At the point where your knee is in my way, this is a frame. You're framing my hip out with your thigh, with the femur. As I extend this, I'm able to get past your knee, accessing the lever, allowing me to
So you're taking my frame and turning it into
a lever.
A great example of a frame into a lever.
Absolutely. Another way you can do this, and I believe this is the method that Bernardo favors, is just grabbing the pants and stuffing it down. It's a more direct way, and frankly one that I think requires a little bit more strength. And my arm trying to push your leg down is not going to have the same effect as me hamstring curling your leg. But they both work, obviously. Bernardo Faria has more than proven that technique works. So kind of whatever works better for you. Again, one of the running themes of this series is that the individual details are sometimes going to change based on body type, based on athleticism, based on what feels better for you. But the underlying concepts, principles are what you're focusing on executing. All right, our fourth example of hip and lever-based guard passing is the leg drag. This is probably the most popular guard pass over the last couple of years. It's very dynamic. It's used by standing passers. The Mendes brothers are the best example of this. They have an excellent leg drag arsenal from any number of places. Couple of details I'm just going to go over on the leg drag. The sort of classical version 1.0 is to grab the pant leg here and then pull the leg by. And this is by no means wrong. This is a very successful method of utilizing the leg drag. But what we try to do, and what I've seen the Mendes brothers utilize more recently, is although they still use this, they do a lot of ankle control and pressure to set up a counter push on the part of their opponent. And not only that, if they don't get a counter push, by rolling the person up onto their shoulders, they're denying them a little bit of base and making it easier to access lever control. So in this case, I'm going to start with indirect lever control and then move to direct hip and lever control. And there are a couple of important footwork things that help this really work. What I'm going to start to do is move to one side, which is usually going to cause you to follow me exactly. And that's what I'm counting on. I want to, rather than standing in your guard and fairly obviously telling you, hey, I'm going to leg drag you, what I want to do is make you think I'm going to move around your guard and then drag you as you react. And you'll notice I've taken a deep step in with my right shin. This is controlling the lever to your hip right here. It's allowing me to push you in this direction. If I don't do that, if I just try to throw your legs by, you notice how easily you can react. But if I throw your legs by and step here, try to do the same thing, it's very difficult. And I can now move into lever and direct hip control to finish the leg drag pass. So one more time, if we can just do a slightly different angle, and I'm going to go over a little detail of what I'm doing with my left foot. So if I get this double ankle control, I start to move, I throw the leg by, I'm going to close my elbow in front of your thigh so that my armpit covers your knee. Because right now, you still have a frame in between us. So I'm controlling one lever, but here there's still a frame. So by bringing my shoulder and armpit in front of this, I've turned that into a lever as well. I'm now going to start to settle my knee down, and I want to get my head underneath your head to break your posture. But if you notice the way my foot is positioned, if I bring my foot close to my body, Stephan, you could push me away, please. Oh yeah, that's pretty easy. But I'll get you to push me away now. No problem. Base, guys. Base is a platform from which to apply and absorb force. Right now, if I want to apply force, the fact that my foot is positioned here means that the only way I can generate force effectively is in that direction. I don't want to do that. I want to go in this direction. Also, the way that my opponent is going to generate force is going to be in this direction. My foot being posted this way matches a force vector going this way, not one going this way. So make sure to place my foot roughly 45-degree angle behind me. Now I can drive my head into you, or if you're pushing me away, I can prevent you from pushing me away. So little details like that are what make the difference between success and failure. Not you knowing a leg drag, but you understanding alignment throughout all of your guard passing movements. Okay, the next pass we're going to go over in this hip and lever theme is the double unders pass, which at first glance doesn't seem like it's a hip and lever control because usually you're just directly grabbing the hips, and there are a few different ways to do this. But what you'll also notice is my shoulders right now are behind Stephan's knees, so I am actually accessing the levers to his hip as I attach myself to his hip. So this is an example of a hip and lever based pass. So again, there are a few different ways of doing this. The sort of classical old school method I don't favor as much just because of the access to a lever here to the elbow push escape. So what we're going to do is go over a method that you see, I think Andre Galvao uses this, and Murillo Santana is maybe the best example of this style of passing, where rather than staying on the knees, what he does is he gets his weight forward off his knees to stack the opponent. And then we're going to make a frame here with our knee. We're going to posture through, pinning you, and then finishing the guard pass. So it's one of those things that really helped my game. I didn't used to have a lot of success with the double unders pass, and once I learned this method, it actually became something that I found a fair bit of success with.
So I suppose it doesn't matter, but in your example, you're doing a double under grip versus coming around both.
Yes.
Both sides.
So in this example, I am gripping underneath the butt, although you can grip like this. I think, again, the method that I prefer to teach is one that avoids this alignment. This alignment is just bound to expose my elbow on some level, whereas this alignment can keep my elbow hidden. So I'm giving you proper framework as I turn to pass the guard, and also by bringing my knee forward. You notice I start to pin your knee, which is going to get into opposite corner rotational control, which is the next method that we're going to address. But this one kind of bridges the gap between the two methods. The initial part is a hip and lever, and then the next part actually becomes a rotational control type pass. So we're going to do this once from standing. I'm going to use sole control, drive in, get underneath Stephan's hips, get off my knees right away, trying to maintain the pressure as I walk my knee into his ribs, turning him over, sinking down onto his hip for the hip control, and establishing the guard pass from here.